Hey, Internet viewers, welcome back. Today is July 13th, 2018, and I have a very special guest with us today. It is Jon Bystrom. We're going to be introducing him in just a moment and get into the nuts and bolts of today's interview, but I want to warn you, today's material is pretty controversial. It's probably going to be information that you have not heard before, and I'm going to encourage you as a truth seeker to be open and amenable to provable facts. Always have extreme discernment and use critical thinking. So as we go through this information, based on the facts that our guest is going to introduce today, I am going to hope that you, along with myself, will be open to learning the information and adjusting the views accordingly. I think some of the things that Mr. Bystrom is going to be covering with us today is going to blow us away. It's not what you've been taught in terms of church history, and who these key players, Joseph Smith, Brigham Young, Willard Richards, John Taylor, Dallin H. Oaks. We're going to be going over Martin Harris. So we're going to cover the founding figures as well as figures from today and uncover who they really are and were. I also want to thank the viewer, Andrew, for his comments. He made a statement, I do believe in synchronicities, and he talked about how, in the comments below, you can read it on one of the videos, he said that he agreed with much of the information that I put out there, except for the fact that Joseph Smith was not a polygamist. He also talked about Willard Richards' involvement in the murder of Hyrum and Joseph, and that this was an order put out by Brigham Young. He also provided a link, 2 links. So I'm going to encourage the viewers to look at that today. Thank you for your comments, Andrew, because I think this interview is going to be right up your alley. We're going to cover that today. So let's introduce our guest. His name is Jon Bystrom. I'm going to read a little bit of his bio. His credits are too much for me to memorize, so hang in there with me. He is from Rockford, Illinois, a newspaper boy, Eagle Scout, honor student, military contractor employee, a real estate investor, a real estate contractor. He was a missionary, 25-year journalist, TV cameraman, peace delegate, screenwriter, activist, newspaper co-founder, assistant editor. This is my favorite, an unrepentant whistleblower. So that's pretty funny. Court fraud target, free speech target, and religious rights violation targeted by deep state church and state leaders in secret combination to violate his rights and steal from him. He has been a target from the deep state church and as well as the government for 40 years. How are you, Jon?
Good. How you doing, Madeline?
I'm good. Thanks for joining us today.
We're going to take a paradigm shift.
I'm excited about that because if it's one thing I love, it's to challenge the current paradigm and to shatter the illusions of what's going on so we can get at the heart of the truth.
Amen. That's the bottom line.
And just for the viewer's sake, Jon's having a little issue with the camera, so from time to time he's going to just kind of wipe it off. He likes to keep the camera covered so that the NSA and the powers that be and the big question mark of they can't see in. So let's get started today. Jon, you have lots of things to share with us. Let's start with your family connections. Where are you from?
Originally, my family was from the Red Wing, Minnesota area. And my grandma and my dad, all his brothers and sisters went to the Utah school, which was founded in the late 1800s by some Mormons that had left Utah, set up a mill on the Trimble Creek, and it was the only school around. And so my grandma and her brothers and sisters and my dad and his brothers and sisters, most of them went to the only school that was there, which was the Utah school. Then my dad went to Minneapolis and he got involved in business. He ended up joining the Rosicrucians. And he never told us this stuff. He told me once about it. And he never talked about it because it wasn't something that he wanted us involved in. But he had joined the Rosicrucians in Minneapolis. And what had happened was he got spooked by something they had asked him to do. He kept a box of information about the Rosicrucians, and after he died, somebody in the family destroyed it. So we really have no trail to go by there except for the few pieces that I have from memory.
Okay, can I just interject real quick and clarify something? You are only invited into the Rosicrucians via the bloodline. You have to be bloodline in order to be a part of this, correct?
That's correct.
So that put you and your family on the map.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And that has to do with the Rh negative blood type.
Mm-hmm.
They, for some reason, the call them the Illuminati, the Masons, the Rosicrucians, who guard the ancient secrets of the second oldest religion, which is Satanism, Luciferianism.
Mm-hmm. They
know the secrets of the ancients. And so they only want bloodlines in because there's something connected to a spiritual connection that I think we all have it, but the Rh negative have a more natural proclivity to those openings that they're looking for.
As well as the O negative. So it'd be Rh negative and O negative.
Any negative, any of the negatives would be O negative. I think any negative would be an Rh negative.
Do you know your blood type?
I don't know my blood type, but in my family there's
okay.
Rh negative.
Regardless, that puts you on the map from the time you were a small child, correct?
Well, that's what I'm reading is that the Satanists that are secretly running the world. The world has an operating system like Norton and like Windows. People don't know that Norton, if you compare the operating system that we have is capitalism and free market, there's an underground operating system like Norton on your Windows that operates unseen. People don't know about it. Norton protects you. The Satanists are just the opposite. They're out to hurt you.
Do you need to disconnect that or something?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, great. So there's an underground operating system.
That's 5,000 years old, and probably more. I mean, when you look at the book of Enoch, Jesus Christ quoted Enoch the most because Enoch talked about, most of what he talked about were the last days. Now, that's one of those books that we don't have in the canon version of our Bible, and that's because that's a secret history that the Masons and the Illuminati carry for themselves, and they use that information against us.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at all religions have been infiltrated. The same way that I'm going to describe how Mormonism was infiltrated, all religions have the same pattern. You start out with a gathering of saints. Those saints could be Muslim, Jew, Hindu, whatever, a gathering of saintly people with good moral, godly values. What happens is that the Satanists who have been in control since Egypt, since Babylon, since Nimrod wanted to create a counterfeit religion, and God destroyed the Babylon to stop the Tower of Babel to stop it. It's the age-old pattern. Mm-hmm. Jesus Christ, for instance, we're not taught in Sunday school that the reason Jesus Christ was murdered was because he threw the bankers out of the temple. Now, they let him get away with all kinds of shenanigans. Turn your water into wine, make fish out of nothing, loaves of bread, jumping out of empty baskets. But when he threw the bankers out of the temple, he was murdered a week later. Now, that banking relationship between the saints and the bankers, again, is age old. And after Christ and all the apostles were murdered, his mission only lasted 3 years. The apostles and the original Christians, who were a sect of Judaism, then were hunted down. 300 years later, Constantine comes on the scene and combines state and church together for Rome's profit. Church and state together is never good for the people.
Right.
And as we've seen, pedophilia never came up for 2,000 years when you had state and church together, right? Even with the Reformation after 500 years, the pedophilia issue is only 20, 30 years old as far as people being aware in order to stop it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's people even today that deny that it ever happened. So that operating system goes back to Rome, to when Constantine took over the Christian church, manipulated the doctrine, took out a lot of the good things that were there, took out the Book of Enoch. As the Vatican then set up feudalism, which is just a fancy way of saying slavery.
Mm-hmm.
It's an open plantation where we all know who the boss is. He has the right to come and have sex with your children, with your wife, with you. Church and state, who's going to stop them? The authority is one.
The state.
There's no separation.
And I don't know if people have realized this, but all the top religious figures and the top governmental figures bow to the Vatican. They kiss the Vatican's hand. So there is no separation. And that includes the Mormon Church.
Well, and that's because the Masons took over the Mormon Church when Brigham Young, who was a Mason agent of, now you have to follow the money trail to follow. This isn't something that I had a vision, and if you pray about it, you're going to get a burning in your bosom and know that no, you can follow the money trail. I love the faith-based stuff, but I really am a skeptic and like proof. When you follow Brigham Young's money trail, he was, I believe, when you follow it, you see that, number one, he was a Mason. Mm-hmm. The head of the Masons in America was Kuhn Loeb and Company, bankers, who were agents of Rothschild. They were from Cleveland, Ohio. Kirtland is 18 miles from Cleveland, Ohio. You have proximity, you have opportunity, you have a trail now that it may be disconnected for now, but I'm sure that with the journals that are coming forward that have been kept secret for all these years that are coming forward, I think that trail is going to be more clear of Brigham Young was an agent of Kuhn Loeb. Now, after that, the record is pretty clear of Brigham Young's direct line of financial authority connected to E.H. Harriman. E.H. Harriman was groomed by Kuhn Loeb and Company. Okay, there's a direct connection because E.H. Harriman was the agent of Kuhn Loeb and Company to create the Union Pacific Railroad.
Right.
By an act of Congress in 1862 during the Civil War. I believe this is the beginning of the military-industrial complex because E.H. Harriman then made an exclusive contract with the Rockefeller family to ship Rockefeller oil. Rockefeller's philosophy is competition is a sin, and they put out all their competition through illegal means, legal, illegal, you name it. They, by murder and deceit, they put out all their competition. That's how Standard Oil was founded in 1870, and also was a founding member then of the Federal Reserve.
Do you think Joseph Smith understood Brigham Young's affiliations?
I think in the end he did. A week before, what was it, June 15th in the Times and Seasons, Joseph Smith and Hyrum wrote two editorials. On the left-hand column was Joseph talking about anybody in the church, especially in the higher authorities, who are caught practicing polygamy, will be tried and excommunicated. Well, this is just, he was murdered. Joseph Smith and his brother Hyrum were murdered on June 27th. So this is just, 12 days later.
Now, some might say that's hypocrisy. He is saying this on the outside, but secretly he's practicing polygamy, and there are records that indicate that he was having sex with Fanny, and that Emma had seen them in the barn, and the list goes on and on. We have accounts for that. So how can we explain those accounts as being fraudulent? Because that's what you and I have talked about. So let's go over that, because we want to make sure that we get to the bottom of this mystery. If we can clear Joseph, at least in that he was not a polygamist, I'm willing to consider that. The other stuff we'll have to take on one at a time, but let's talk about the polygamy.
Okay, let me work my way back to show how I even came to be curious to see what Joseph Smith was doing, in secret, if he was. Mm-hmm. About a year ago, I found out that a general authority secretly owns my house. When I found that out, I said, okay, there's something drastically wrong now. I knew that there were members of the church here in Rockford who were in bed with the local city government who has been defrauding me. I knew that the city government had been defrauding me for 39 years. I knew that there were members of the church who were part of the city cartel. When I found Jack Ward's name on documents, that was it. I mean, now let's follow the money trail. Well, then I looked up and found him as the largest shareholder of Amcor Bank that went belly up in 2010. He was a secret banker. Nobody at church knew. I talked to all the people at church. Nobody knew he was a secret banker.
Now, Jack Ward is who? For the viewer's sake.
He is the son-in-law of Dallin Oaks, apostle and next in line to take over the Mormon church. Now, I don't attend church anymore. I stopped in 1989, 1990, when I was defrauded. My family was defrauded, my dad and my brother, by two leaders of the church, one in the stake presidency, one in the bishopric. They were found guilty of fraud in court. We have a judgment for $115,000. One moved to Pennsylvania, got wiped clean. One moved to Salt Lake, filed a Chapter 11, and got only had to pay a third, which coincidentally was exactly our attorney's fees. So they knew this is the way they do it. But these guys, we've had a Mormon mafia that moved into Rockford in 1978 when I got targeted, and that's where I started working back Jack Ward, from finding out that he was the largest shareholder of Amcor Bank. And since I had already done extensive research on the Clinton-Bush cocaine cartel in Illinois, in America, I was a missionary in Argentina, where I found out the CIA was trafficking the coke out of Bolivia, and the top trafficker was a Mormon, Sonia Italia. This is all in a book called The Big White Lie by Michael Levine, who was the DEA agent at the same time I was there as a missionary. He exposed it all. So I come back to Rockford and I tell my captors, the people targeting me, the accountant for the top Democrat in town, who owns the largest cocaine outlet, which received a mortgage from Jack Ward's Amcor Bank, of which he was the largest shareholder. When I started putting two and two together, I looked up systematics, which I knew was the money laundering tool of the CIA, owned by Jackson Stevens, who financed Walmart. Your cocaine and heroin money is going to finance Walmart. 1969, Jackson Stevens was the financier of Walmart's initial Wall Street public offering. So when you follow this whole mess, the cocaine, the heroin, the pedophile networks we'll talk about, those are all feeding the demise of America, of world freedoms, of religion, especially Christianity, especially the saintly people in the Jewish and Muslim communities, because mostly saints there too. Now they're being manipulated. They have their infiltrators, just like the Mormons have their infiltrators taken over the leadership positions. The Muslims have the same thing.
Zionists.
Zionists, the same thing, exactly. And it all centers around the Rothschilds. It's their money that controls the Masons in America. And again, getting back then to Brigham Young. In a nutshell, about a year ago, just a little bit before I discovered the Jack Ward, Dallin Oaks trails, I had discovered a video on YouTube by a man named Joseph Smith, who's a member of, I believe he's the channel is called Remnant of Jacob, I believe. And I'm
I
not sure.
thought he mentioned being our LDS.
I think he is. I think he is.
Okay.
I think he's reorganized.
Okay.
And I believe his theory nails it. The only thing I disagree, it's called the Carthage Conspiracy. And the guy that's doing it is named Joseph Smith, and it's you can find it on YouTube. I've watched it many times. It boils down to the ballistics of the bullets. Dallin Oaks wrote the official Carthage Conspiracy church version, where musket bullets did all the damage. Well, when you watch the conspiracy, the Carthage Conspiracy, you'll see that the ballistics prove that it didn't happen the way the official church version said, the way Dallin Oaks said it did.
I had to laugh a little bit when I saw that. I did watch that YouTube. When I was in 6th grade, my teacher, during our lessons on the Civil War, he brought in a musket, a Civil War musket. Of course, you can't get away with that now. But he demonstrated how you have to load the thing. And when Joseph Smith, the presenter in this YouTube, was talking about how Hyrum was hit in the face and then went down saying, I'm a dying man.
Right.
I had to laugh because what he's saying is accurate. His face would be gone.
That's right.
He couldn't say those words. So that's one lie right there.
Well, and the big difference is you can see it on John Taylor's watch.
Mm-hmm.
They say it's a musket ball that hit John Taylor from outside. The angles don't work from outside, hitting through the window. If you shoot a musket ball or a rifle from outside into one of those windows, you're going to hit ceiling. You're not going to hit any person at that door. So the forensics and the ballistics don't add up. The pocket watch of John Taylor, you can see and measure that it's a 28 caliber, not a 69 caliber musket ball. A musket ball is so much more powerful, it would have obliterated that watch.
Okay, so what you're saying is that Joseph and Hyrum, let's talk about that. Joseph and Hyrum were murdered by John Taylor and Willard Richards.
That's right.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about that. Not only do we have ballistic evidence that it was not a musket, it could not have been, that it was a 28 caliber. Let's talk about opportunity and how they happened to get those weapons, because Joseph was not under official arrest.
Correct. He was there voluntarily under the guarantee of Governor Ford. Now, this is where I disagree with Joseph Smith on the video. I do believe that Governor Ford, Thomas Ford, I believe his name was, I do believe he was in on it. Because I don't believe when you have access to all the witnesses and all the evidence that you're going to walk away from that scene with the conclusion that he walked away with. And nobody was ever convicted, which means if someone ambitious in the church wanted to convict somebody of murder, you would probably end up convicting Willard Richards and John Taylor.
So why do you think they were so willing to participate and put themselves in the middle of gunfire? Why would they be willing to do that?
Number one, they had already made the secret oaths with the Masonic polygamy. I don't believe Joseph was a polygamist, and I believe that the secret oaths is why they did what they did. And of course, John Taylor then became the third prophet of the church. So there was a quid pro quo for him. Willard Richards died young. He died at like 57 years old, but he was the official church historian. Now, according to the theory of the Carthage Conspiracy, what happened was there were a couple of Mormons that slipped one revolver to Joseph and one single shot to Hyrum. They didn't know that John Taylor also had a weapon. So what happened was when the ambush began, there was a storm of assailants come up the stairs. Joseph met them, killed 2, and wounded 1. So he had 3 bullets left. While he was shooting, excuse me, while he was shooting in the stairway, John Taylor opened fire on Hyrum and shot him in the back. Hyrum turned around, struggled for the weapon. John Taylor was aiming the weapon up under his torso towards his brain, fired off the weapon. It entered under his sternum and then lodged into his brain. Hyrum had no way he could have said, "I'm a dead man," because his brain was already shattered at that point. So he hits the floor. Joseph turns, sees his brother struggling with John Taylor, shoots John Taylor in the thigh, took out a chunk of his thigh, shot him in the knee, and shot the pocket watch. So the pocket watch was Joseph Smith's, probably his last act on this earth, was firing that weapon, firing that shot into that John Taylor's watch. So John Taylor rolls under the bed, supposedly, drops the weapon. Joseph then goes towards his brother, Hyrum, who's laying there dead, not knowing that Willard Richards is going to pick up the weapon. As Willard Richards picks up the weapon, Joseph Smith, then I'm not sure if he would have seen it, but tried to make an escape out the window, and Willard Richards shot him in the back and then pushed him out the window, because he had to be outside to make the theory hold up that a faceless mob killed him. So he had to end up outside. And then Willard Richards went over to Hyrum and shot him in the face. That's how he got the bullet hole in his, right here in his, next to his eye.
Willard, you're saying Willard shot Hyrum in the face?
After he was laying there, probably dead already, to make sure. After shooting Joseph, pushing him out the window, he went over to Hyrum and gave him a shot to the face. Now, that wouldn't have blown out the back of his head, because the impact would have been absorbed by the floor. Mm. And especially if it would have been a musket shot going through his nose, the back of his head would have been gone. That's not the way the forensics laid out. So when you watch this video, you're going to see that this guy, he's a smart person. And he's a rifle enthusiast. He knows what bullets are. He knows what muskets and what, a revolver is compared to a musket rifle. Mm-hmm. So there's also journals that he will cite in that video that says people saw Brigham Young in Nauvoo the night before. Now, this was 9 days before Joseph Smith was going to hold his first rally as a candidate for the President of the United States, as an abolitionist, as a pro-Indian. The powers that be didn't want that. Number one, the Masons are the founders of the KKK. Mm-hmm. Albert Pike from Arkansas, and there is a history of Arkansas Mormon hostilities, but the Grand Wizard Dragon, Albert Pike, he was the top KKK clan founder in America. So, and he was also connected to Kuhn Loeb Company, also financed by Rothschild. So when you follow Brigham Young in Nauvoo, you have people that saw him in Nauvoo the night before, not just one, but several. There's one witness that saw Brigham Young amongst the mob in blackface. Now, see, blackface was pre-mob. You want to obscure your face. Later on it became put a sheet over your head. You have to clean up afterwards. So it's totally consistent with the way infiltrators take over an organization, murder the founder, create polygamy. Number one, polygamy was secret before Joseph Smith was murdered. After that, it was 1847 that Brigham Young announced the official polygamy of the church. And I believe that was at Winter Quarters where he announced that. So all during this time, you had 40,000 saints in America. You had 12,000 in Nauvoo. Only 4,000 went west. Some of them followed Sidney Rigdon. Some of them followed the Strangites. You had several different factions of people that were not going along with Brigham Young, including Emma Smith.
Right.
Including Lucy Mack Smith, who claimed in letters between her and her family that Brigham Young was behind the murders of Hyrum, Joseph, and then a month later, Samuel was poisoned. The heir to the church, to the head of the church, Samuel, Joseph and Hyrum's younger brother, was poisoned. Now, in 1877, Brigham Young was also allegedly poisoned. John Taylor was also allegedly poisoned.
Too bad it didn't work.
Well, yeah, not soon enough. Willard Richards, or not Willard Richards, Wilford Woodruff attended a banquet for him in his honor at Bohemian Grove.
Well, really?
To discuss the financial loans with the secret bankers. And he died of alleged poisoning after a hearty meal with the Bohemian brothers. Samuel Smith's daughter was a member of Bohemian Grove. So you kill off the kids, and then you groom the children into the Illuminati and the Masonic weirdo-ness, you know.
Okay, so I want to pause right here and go back to Willard Richards, because I've mentioned him before in at least 2 videos, I believe, as being a church historian. So this is where the twists and the perversions can be traced back to, correct? Is with Willard Richards twisting what the saints now know as the Mormon history.
Correct.
Okay, now I've mentioned this in an interview with Christy Allen, and that is Carrie Ross O'Boren, who was a church historian and had access to the infamous LDS vaults. I think it was for like 3 years. And he put out a book, The Widow's Son, in which he goes over some of the wives of Joseph. So do you believe, and I'm asking, based on the information that we have coming forth regarding Willard Richards' twisting and revamping of history, do you believe that those records were put into the vault already in a twisted state, and that's the information that he was basing his material on?
Absolutely. They started rewriting the history immediately.
Okay.
You know, they knew that they had to get the history changed, because you had look at all the witnesses you had.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have only 4,000 of 40,000 members, well, 40,000 worldwide members, but 12,000 from Nauvoo, only 4,000 followed Brigham Young. Now, that's not to say that they're evil people, or they were following, they knew that Brigham Young had murdered. A lot of them were immigrants. You know, they'd left everything. They had put everything into the church in the faith of Joseph Smith having restored the Church of Jesus Christ. They believed that. They were saintly people, but they had nowhere to go. If they stayed in Illinois, they were going to be murdered. So a lot of the saints then dispersed, but the ones that had no place else to go, that were vulnerable, that, hey, there's a promised land for us. We're not wanted anywhere else. Let's go. I don't care who's in charge. Let's just get out of here.
There's always a big brother daddy type willing to step in and take control of individuals who are basically lost and vulnerable.
Look at the animal world. The sharks follow the tuna, right? Or whatever they follow. They follow the schools of fish. We have 3% of sociopaths of the human race. I don't know if you're familiar with that statistic or not.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and then you have secondary sociopaths.
Created ones, people that are, I'm not sure that anybody's born a sociopath. I believe they're created through these pedophile networks. Mm-hmm. You create a sociopath when you disassociate their feelings because of the trauma that they've experienced. So if we stop pedophilia, we stop a huge problem in the world. Mm-hmm. It's obviously a huge problem when you have the popes, when you have Edward Heath, former prime minister of Great Britain, allegedly, 16 infants that he murdered. Jimmy Savile, who was the Dick Clark of British music. Royal favorite, had access, raised money for the children's hospitals, and had a special room where he could molest the children. And everybody knew about it.
Mm-hmm.
And this, again, is the problem. When you have a church and state authority, which is absolute tyranny, same thing you had in Rome when Constantine took over the church and made it the state religion. Church and state authority is all one. There's nowhere to go. You know, the government and church are the same. You had that in Utah. You had that with Governor Brigham Young. Mm-hmm. He was everything. He was the prophet. He was the governor. And then when you follow the top polygamists of the apostles that were the ones that kept the secret on who killed Joseph Smith, they all became the senators, the police chiefs, the state representatives, the heads of the military. They all got leadership positions because they were going to keep the secrets. So,
and they put their dirty deeds out for everyone to see, but nobody had any power in order to do anything about it. You know, when you look at the temple and when it was the Salt Lake Temple and it was created, it was Brigham Young and the Orson Pratt and all these people who put that together. They put their satanic symbolisms all over the temple. They instituted the blood atonement. They had all kinds of stuff that they were doing that was implemented through Brigham, not Joseph. So I'm not surprised by that at all.
Well, and like I say, as a missionary, now I'm not just speaking from some theory. I did nothing but apologize for Brigham Young. How many missionaries are out there today? 30,000, 50,000? I think it's 50,000. From a corporate point of view, if I was a corporate CEO of the church, I would say, get Brigham Young out of the church. Let's admit what he did. Let's repent of what he did, especially to the black saints.
I don't know if you're ever going to be able to amend that one, but they can give it a good try. You know, and I was thinking if they really wanted to save their church at this point, they do need to come clean about Brigham Young, and they do need to rename BYU. And that way, actually, they can more endear themselves to Joseph Smith and further edify him as a latter-day prophet. Until they make those corrections, the house of cards will continue to fall.
That's right. People are leaving the church in droves because they believe the Brighamite lies that Joseph Smith was a polygamous, dirty hypocrite. Now, let me add one more aspect of this. Let's say that Joseph Smith was a con artist, okay? Everybody can accept that, right?
I happen to believe that the Book of Mormon was plagiarized and he was an occultist. I'm reconsidering my views on the polygamy based on our conversation and the material that you and I have been going over. So, line upon line.
And if you look at Joseph Smith, for instance, as if he did write the Book of Mormon, the guy was brilliant, because I've written for 40 years. And I couldn't do a Book of Mormon. I couldn't do a Book of Mormon if you gave me 20 years to do it. So, but let's add another element here. Let's say it's fiction. Okay, it's fiction. He made it up. He still foretold all these things. Number one message of the Book of Mormon is stop the satanic secret combinations or conspiracies which are attempting to take over the world. That's the Masonic agenda right there.
Mm-hmm. I think it was stolen fiction, but that might be another conversation.
Well, and for argument's sakes, I'll concede what that is. But if I say that, okay, he fictionalized it, he plagiarized it, whatever, then why didn't he do like Mark Twain and make some money? Write the next novel, write the next novel, write the next novel. Instead, he said, I got 2/3 coming if you people weren't so wicked. Now, would Mark Twain said, I'm not writing anymore. I'm not going to write any more of that Tom Sawyer because you people are just wicked. It's not consistent with reality that I know of human nature. So, number one, if it's fiction, he was a damn good guesser. Because just like George Orwell was a good guesser because he was an insider with the British government and British intelligence, Joseph Smith perhaps had so much inside intelligence he could maybe write a Book of Mormon. I don't believe that's the case, because I also have had spiritual manifestations. So when people are like, you can't read out of a stone. Well, I've never read out of a stone, but I have seen the other side. Mm-hmm. And so I have a knowledge that there is an afterlife. Mm-hmm. I almost drowned when I was 6. And so I know what a life review is. Just before I took my water breath, I saw my little 6-year-old life pass before me. Well, I'd never heard that before. I'm 6 years old. I jumped in a 9-foot deep end where, I was only 4 feet tall. So I'd gone up and down about 5 or 6 times, and I was just exhausted. And I saw like a videotape rewinding in reverse, and you see everything of your little life. And when I got pulled out, my dad and lifeguard pulled me out, and I almost drowned, and I'm just amazed at what was that, And of course, I didn't talk to anybody about it for years and years and years. But I've had other spiritual manifestations, dreams, of course, where you actually feel that it's real. In Argentina as a missionary, let me back up a little bit more. In 1972, I was ordained a deacon, and I was invited, as all young priesthood holders are, to attend a meeting in Chicago, Stake. And I attended the meeting. Ezra Taft Benson was the speaker. He was an apostle back then. This is 1972. I'm 12 years old. I had my little notepad. I still got the notes. And
it's cute.
Told her, I want to be a good deacon,
Yeah.
And so I took notes, and he told us all to read a book called None Dare Call It Conspiracy. And he also quoted the Book of Mormon that the satanic secret conspiracies were plotting to take over the world. Now we call it the New World Order. There it is.
There it is, folks. Read this.
That is an excellent book. And in 1972, that was so far ahead of its time. Mm-hmm. So as a 12-year-old, I read the book, and it fried my brain. I'm reading all about these new words that I never heard of. I'm reading the dictionary as much as the book. So the crux of what the book says is that the Rothschilds have been funding the wars on both sides for the past 200 years. As a 12-year-old, I learned that banking at the top levels of this pyramid of authority, of hierarchy in the world, governments, at the top level, the Rothschilds are funding both sides. Communism, I learned, was a creation of British intelligence. Engels, who was Karl Marx's handler, was a British intelligence agent. The Bolshevik Revolution was funded by American and British bankers and German bankers. Mm-hmm. Lenin and Trotsky both had millions of dollars to do that. And once they were done with the revolution, they were both taken out. And then Stalin installed. And he was our good buddy through World War II. Remember that? Mm-hmm. He was our good buddy. So when you follow the Rothschild money trail, you see that Brigham Young connects directly to the Rothschild. You see that Brigham Young connects directly to the Masons, connects directly to the KKK. Blacks are prohibited from holding the priesthood after Brigham Young takes over the church. Mm-hmm. And there are a couple of black priesthood holders like Elijah Abel, who would put anybody to shame according to the records of how he could preach, of the Spirit of God in him. His descendants apparently were not denied the priesthood because his content of character was authority. It was authority.
He had proven himself.
Well, you couldn't deny. Who could deny it? Mm-hmm. I mean, you can defraud people that don't know better, but when you see this man preach and you see who he is, you don't dare challenge that.
Mhm.
So when you follow Brigham Young goes out to Utah, takes the saints out there. Union Pacific Railroad, 1862, is created by an act of Congress. It's a quasi-government private corporation. All the senators and representatives that passed it were all bribed. They all got a cut, okay? So Brigham Young in 1868 cuts a deal with E.H. Harriman to finish the Union Pacific coming from the east and the Central Pacific coming from Central Pacific coming from the west. The Mormons finished that stretch across Utah because there wasn't laborers out there. There was nobody out there but, you know, the Mormons and the Indians. So Brigham Young promised the saints, if you work for nothing. Where have I heard that before? It's called affinity fraud. If you guys all commit and do it, do it for the Gipper, for all Brother Brigham Young, I guarantee I will pay you. Well, they finished the line and they never got paid. $1 million at $1 to $1.50 an hour. That's almost 1 million hours that the saints got ripped off. Now, don't ask me why you're not taught that in Sunday school.
Right.
You know? I mean, come on. Who's gonna want to teach that about Brigham Young? The other thing about Brigham Young, there's not one revelation of Brigham Young that ever stuck. Blood atonement, gone. Polygamy, gone. All the secret other things that he created. The Adam God theory.
God theory. Mm-hmm.
Gone. What are you hanging on to with Brigham Young but a corpse of an evil Masonic Rothschild agent? The sooner they can get rid of him from the church, the sooner you can have redemption.
But these guys, these brethren, have all made the same blood oath, as did we in the temple unknowingly. Those of us before 1990 and before, we've all made this secret blood oath to the order.
Well, and we thought we were doing it to the Church of Christ. Okay? I hold my oath to the Church of Jesus Christ. Whatever fraud they tried to pull on me, mine goes to Jesus Christ. And that's why I'm sitting here today, because the New Testament says have nothing to do with the dark fruits of, or the fruitless deeds of darkness, but expose them. Now that's, if I'm a Christian and I read the New Testament and it says I should expose the fruitless deeds of darkness, then I'm going to do it, right? So to me, the New Testament, the last book of the New Testament is Revelations, right? The New Testament tells me expose the secret Satanists that have taken over the world and are out to destroy the saints of all nations, not just the Mormons or the Christians or
right.
All nations.
So let's talk about Dallin H. Oaks and then work back with his connection, because I think it's important that people understand that we're not just talking about 1830s, 1877. This is going on today. This line, this brotherhood line, is unbroken. So let's talk about who is Dallin H. Oaks.
A year ago, when I discovered that Jack Ward was behind these other LDS members, his son, Jack Ward's son, was involved in selling me a property he bought for $42,000. He sold it to a proxy. See, they hide behind these KKK type corporate sheets to hide their identities. I've always operated under my good name. People who operate under limited liability corporations and they have to hide behind their corporate entities, they do that because they're doing things that they don't want to be held accountable for. So one of Jack Ward's sons was involved with some of the frauds that they roped me into to sell me. If you buy these 6 fraudulent properties from us, bait and switches, we'll sell the property that was stolen from you in court from 2002 to 2006. So when I began to see how Jack Ward's son was in on it, then I found Jack Ward's name connected to the incorporation. Then I started looking at Dallin Oaks. I found that Jack Ward, his largest shareholder at Systematics, Bush, Clinton, Vince Foster written cocaine money laundering program. Well, that's you don't have to look very much further when you find that connection, because that connects to the CIA.
And for the viewers, connect Jack Ward and Dallin H. Oaks.
Exactly.
Who are they to each other?
So as soon as I found Jack Ward was connected to Systematics, who was the largest shareholder of the bank, who had loaned the largest cocaine outlet in Winnebago County, public housing authority, secretly owned by the top Democrat who was campaign manager for the next 40 years of all the mayors, including the one that cost me $500,000 by withholding my evidence. When I found that connection, that he was involved in all of it, the next logical one was, who was Dallin Oaks? I started following Dallin Oaks. And when I started following Dallin Oaks, I found that he was a former State's Chicago Daily Machine State's Attorney in Chicago during the time that David M. Kennedy, top Mormon, award-winning Mormon, special envoy to the first presidency of the church, was the chairman of Continental Bank, top partner with the Vatican Bank, that introduced in 1959 heroin to America.
Chicago is mob country.
Total mob country. So you had, in 1959, you can go online and look up the Mormon Mafia. This was where the Mormon Mafia, as far as a part of the state apparatus, begins. Compiled by George Herbert Walker Bush, whose money line goes back to Prescott Bush, Union Bank, E.H. Harriman, Brigham Young. Now you follow Dallin Oaks. Dallin Oaks' great grand uncle was Martin Harris. Martin Harris financed the Book of Mormon. Martin Harris was on the public committee to investigate and keep the Masons honest, who had allegedly murdered William Morgan, who had exposed the Masonic signs and tokens and secrets in 1825. Martin Harris was on the local anti-Mason committee. Okay, you always want a ringer in there to see what they're talking about. That was 1827. 1829, Martin Harris finances the Book of Mormon. That needs to be investigated also, because I don't know, you could probably connect the Kuhn Loeb Company banking to find out who the banker was that had the mortgage on his farm. Now, a lot of this yet has to be fleshed out, but when you follow Martin Harris, he has a very dubious history. Emma Smith was the first translator of the Book of Mormon. She was the first translator. That's not very popularly known in the church.
I didn't know that, and I taught gospel doctrine.
There you go. See, some of these things are out of the curriculum because the Brighamites do not want the money trail to be discovered, because they are the secret combinations that Joseph Smith and the Book of Mormon warned about. It's them. So they're not gonna put that in the Sunday school lesson. Emma was the first. So when you listen to Emma's testimony that she stands by Joseph Smith, that he was a prophet, she'd have to be a damn liar to say that he was when he wasn't, because she was the first translator. Martin Harris was the second. Martin Harris then asked Joseph Smith if he could take 116 pages. Go ahead.
Translator or scribe?
I'm sorry. Thank you. Scribe.
Okay.
Scribe. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Good. Scribe.
I get a little scrambled myself.
That's okay. You've got a lot of information in there.
Well, I'm fighting for my life. These people would have had me murdered by now. They took my name off all the records of my partnership in 1992.
I was going to ask you specifically, you are not suicidal, correct?
No, no.
Okay.
Oh, no.
All right, neither am I. So we're going on public record saying that we are of sound body and mind, correct?
Correct. And you are not either.
Nope.
Good.
Okay.
No, I would invite, well, I should, no, I won't invite. I won't invite. I'll just say that, no, I want to take them down.
Yeah.
I want to fight Satan. I want to take Satan down. There's no other alternative. If we don't, these people, there are 40 other people who are targeted here in Rockford.
Yeah.
Now, because they don't speak out, there's no way you're going to get a woman to come forward in Rockford with any sexual allegations, let alone a child. The prosecutors protect it.
Right. And I can appreciate that, because that's happening all over, not just the United States, but in other countries as well. So I interrupted you because I wanted to clarify. Emma was the first scribe, then Martin Harris, and now pick up where you were at.
So Martin Harris then asked Joseph Smith if he could borrow and prove to his wife that, what they're doing is real. So Martin Harris takes 116 pages to his wife, and they end up missing. They were in the desk drawer, and they end up missing. Well, in the Doctrine and Covenants, Joseph Smith has to go to the Lord and ask for repentance. I'm sorry, I messed up. I gave him to Martin Harris, and he promised he wouldn't lose him, and whoops. Well, the Lord then reveals to Joseph Smith that Martin Harris is a wicked man. Now, unless he's a wicked man, and you're actually getting some interdimensional advice from a Lord, who would question your banker? Who would call your banker a wicked man? Right? I mean, if this guy, if I don't call my bank, I mean, I'll call my banker a wicked man.
Now I will.
Now I will. But in those days, nobody called their banker a wicked man. I mean, when you follow Joseph Smith, and I see how they've targeted me over 40 years, it's the patterns. Joseph Smith was sued 50 times. How many times was Brigham Young sued? 0. So when you follow who took the brunt and who was setting up, who was surrounding Joseph Smith like wolves in sheep's clothing, that's a common pattern. Even Jesus Christ was betrayed by Judas. Made a little coin.
Sure. So with Martin Harris being the great grandfather of Dallin Oaks, is that correct? Great grandfather?
Great granduncle.
Great granduncle. Okay. What does that mean in terms of Dallin's connections and jars he has his hands in right now?
So then Martin Harris's nephew was Denison Harris. Denison Harris was a spy, allegedly, for Joseph Smith. Okay? Now, when Dallin Oaks tells it, he says that they got caught. They got caught, and they were going to kill him right on the spot. They were going to, do him in right there. But for some miraculous reason, they let him go. Now, that's not consistent with spy work, If somebody's caught a spy and you've got all the stakes going on this program here, you're not going to let out a couple of...
You eliminate the witnesses.
Well, you're either going to tie them up and keep them busy until you're done, or they're going to disappear. So the fact that Denison Harris, Dallin Oaks' great-grandfather, was a spy for Joseph Smith, and we saw how that turned out, I'm a skeptic, okay? Then you follow Denison Harrison, who then went with the Saints out to Salt Lake. I don't know all the history on Denison Harrison, but then Denison Harris' son became the first president of BYU. Now, if you want to keep the secrets, you got to keep the gatekeepers. You got to have the sheriffs, you got to have the governors, the senators, the church historians, right? You need the head of Brigham Young University, okay?
Because this is where the CIA, the FBI, they're recruiting.
That's right.
From BYU.
Well, and when Franklin Harris was the head of BYU, he has kind of some dubious trips over to Iran just before Iran was overthrown. 1953, Dennis and Harrison, take some special trip over to Iran to, teach those stupid people over there in the cradle of civilization how to make crops grow. Doesn't make sense. Why would a BYU president go to Iran a year before they're overthrown to teach them about agriculture when they created agriculture, right? Yeah. Well, you got all these dubious things going on, okay? So then let me follow up to a little more preface on Dallin Oaks. When you follow Dallin Oaks, he then graduates from Dallin Oaks' mother is the daughter of Franklin Harris, the president of BYU.
Okay.
Dallin Oaks' father dies conveniently of TB. He's out of the way. Now you got control of the boy. Okay. Now again, these kids are being groomed, and I'm not going to tell you that Dallin Oaks was born an evil person, that he was born an evil man. He was born into a family that is about all this, that is about keeping the secrets of Brigham Young. It's not Joseph Smith University, is it? So when you
I always wondered about that.
Well, Brigham Young wanted the credit. He was the man of the glory. He wanted everybody's wives. And what did he have? 55 wives? Well,
yeah,
what did the 54 single guys do? Go to Vegas? Go to Reno? Well, yeah,
they were kicked out of the compound.
What happened is that the Mormons then set up brothels just across the line in Nevada. People don't realize also that Meyer Lansky and the Nevada casinos are all financed by Salt Lake bankers. In the movie Godfather 3, there's one line where they refer to, I got to go meet with my Salt Lake bankers. Everybody misses it. It's there. Godfather 3. Now we're talking the mafia and Mormon bankers doing business together, okay? Wow. Mormon mafia. Mitt Romney. I won't even start on Mitt Romney. But
he's an unfortunate soul that's been in a bloodline family as well.
Exactly. They're born into it. Mitt Romney's great uncle, George S. Romney, died in Rockford in 1935, right after the Al Capone. Al Capone was a big presence in Rockford. When Chicago heat got a little bit too much, he would come to Rockford to lay low. He would hang out a block from my house at a restaurant that's today called the Irish Rose, which is the setting of my screenplay called The Discount Detective, where I kind of laid out all this stuff 25 years ago, and now it's kind of happened.
And Mitt's dad was a handler, an MK Ultra handler, correct?
According to Kathy O'Brien in Transformation of America, Mitt Romney's father, George Romney, who was the chairman of AMC, the Rambler, also a candidate for president. Kathy O'Brien claims that she was molested from the time she was a young girl by George Romney. Now, there's so many other people that are involved in this. It isn't just a couple of Mormons. It's Robert Byrd, who again was a grand wizard of the KKK.
Yeah.
Who was also one of these pedophile, blackmailer Satanists. Supposedly Hillary Clinton's handler was Robert Byrd. So when you read about Transformation of America and what Kathy O'Brien went through, she resisted. Now, apparently Hillary couldn't resist. Hillary's family was Hugh Rodomsky, who allegedly, according to Larry Nichols, former handler for the Clintons, Hugh Rodomsky was the one who took over Al Capone's network. When they put Al Capone in prison, not for murder,
tax evasion,
but for cheating the government.
Yeah.
You can cheat us all you want. You can molest our kids, you can murder our families, you can do whatever you want. But when you cheat the government, you go to prison, which is what happened to Al Capone. So, where was I going with that?
Rodham family.
Oh, Rodham family, yes. There's so much of this stuff.
Right. So,
again, Hillary, they're born into it. Now, they were an alleged Jewish family, which is Khazarian Jew, which are not really Jewish, but
crypto Jew, fake Jews.
Right, fake Jews. Now, when you follow the Jews of Germany, you see the same thing. You're seeing what they did to the Jews in Germany, to the Mormons in this country. You have a select, close-knit group of people that you make the bankers. And guarantee, when it comes out that it was the Mormon bankers who were behind the next Holocaust, guess who's going to get blamed for it? The Mormons. We'll all get blamed for it collectively, even though we'll claim that we didn't know. Well, we do know now. So the Mormon connections again with Chicago. You've got the Hugh Rodham family. You've got George Herbert Walker Bush, who put together the Mormon Mafia. David M. Kennedy was the chairman of Continental Bank. David M. Kennedy got his start with the second chairman of the Federal Reserve, Mariner Stoddard Eccles. They didn't teach this in Sunday school.
No, but he certainly has a nice stadium in his honor.
He sure does, and he has the federal building in Washington is named after him also. Now, to be a second chairman of the Federal Reserve, you've got to be a top Satanist. You don't get to that level unless you are a Luciferian worshiping goat, sacrificing, if not children sacrificing. You're the top guy. You are the top Masonic Satanist in a whole class of your own as a second Federal Reserve chairman. It gets better than that. Not only was he the second Federal Reserve chairman, he helped FDR create the New Deal. Now it sounds like, we're here to help. No, what they're there to do is manage the poverty. They created 600 agencies after the Federal Reserve created the Depression with Goldman Sachs, all the usual suspects of the Federal Reserve agent banks, the Chases, the Harriman banks, all these Federal Reserve bankers, particularly Goldman Sachs. According to Rolling Stone in 2008 did a fantastic article laying out the whole chronology of how the Federal Reserve and their agent banks created every war and depressions, from the beginning. Mm. So when you see that the New Deal created over 600 new federal programs, which is what we call socialism today, you'll see where fascism comes from. Fascism is socialism. Communism is socialism. All it means is that at the top level, we got one guy that's gonna plan everything, central planning, and he's in charge, and he's the church and the state, and he has the church and state authority, just like in the old Roman days with the popes. So Mariner Stoddard Eccles also helped create the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. As a missionary in Argentina, I saw how the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank decimated the economy in Argentina. They come in, they give you loans if you pledge your resources and the minerals to the World Bank. The criminals in the government then steal a lot, if not half of the money, but the people still have to pay it back. So what that does is creates inflation. All your money then is diluted by this debt, and you never pay it back. It's always, hanging over you. And and then they sell the resources of the country to deplete, to increase the wealth and deplete the wealth of the country for their own benefit. So Dallin Oaks, David M. Kennedy is assistant to Mariner Stoddard Eccles. in 1933. 1947, David M. Kennedy goes to work for Continental Bank. In no more than 12 years, he's now the top shareholder, chairman of the bank in 12 years. Where's that money come from? In 1959, George Herbert Walker Bush puts together the Mormon Mafia. He's got David M. Kennedy as his top heroin and cocaine money launderer. He also has, now David M. Kennedy is also on the board of trustees of Rockefeller University, University of Chicago. University of Chicago created the Manhattan Project. Okay, people say, there's no way you can keep a secret of all these drug dealers and all these, bankers. The Manhattan Project spent $20 billion by 1945 in order to create the two bombs. It was a secret. Nobody let the secret out.
When they control the media, when they control the information flow, then of course you don't know about these things. And it's very easy. It's actually very easy to control the world when you are controlling these organizations, the banks, the universities, your top religious organizations, and they're controlling the information flow. What's trickled down to you is so filtered and controlled, you have no idea what's going on unless you bother to trace it back. And most people won't do that.
Well, again, people are busy raising families, as people get squeezed financially harder and harder, they have less and less time to find out what the truth is. So it's all a rat's race,
And so go back to, because we need to bring this to a close, but I want to finish with Dallin Oaks and him being the president of BYU, and then his controlling influence there. Because as you and I were talking, you were the one who let me know. I had not looked into him. He had not served as a missionary. He had not served as a bishop, a stake president, a mission president. He has no experience in running these auxiliaries. So what is he doing as second in command?
That is a very good question. And when you find out that Dallin Oaks was on the board of directors of Union Pacific Railroad, same partnership of Brigham Young, when you follow that money trail. Now, you're not going to be taught in Sunday school that Dallin Oaks is on the board of directors of the same partnership with George Herbert Walker Bush. George Herbert Walker Bush's father was the top CEO of Union Bank, which was the Bank of Union Pacific Railroad. Dallin Oaks is put together in 1959, I believe, as a partner with George Herbert Walker Bush as the head, or at least one of the top heads to be groomed for the Mormon Mafia. Then you have Dallin Oaks. Dallin Oaks is a professor of law and trust at the University of Chicago, at the same time that David M. Kennedy is on the board of trustees. One of the other things about Rockefeller University, University of Chicago, is they keep the secrets of ancient Mesopotamia, ancient Iraq. If you follow the Anunnaki story of Zechariah Sitchin, that all takes place in ancient Iraq, Mesopotamia. The man that translated the Sumerian alphabet, that made that translation possible, is from Rockford. His name is James Henry Breasted, and Indiana Jones is modeled after him.
Now, I do know that Zechariah was also a Mason, so you have to be very careful because some of that information is a little bit off, but there's a whole core of it that is great, and we get a lot of history from it. You just have to be very discerning when you go through it because, again, we've got that Masonic connection.
Well, and what I believe is that if Joseph Smith had not been murdered and we had gotten the rest of that Book of Mormon, it would have been an E.T. story. What more are you going to tell us about how to baptize somebody and, all the ritual? That's the simple stuff. It's like what Jesus Christ said. I've told you of the earthly things and you didn't believe me. How am I going to tell you about heavenly things?
Now, who was it that wrote, was it William Branley that wrote Gods of Eden?
Yes.
He
Yes. In
mentions that
fact,
possibility in his book.
that's right. That's right.
Okay.
That's right. Even Eric von Daniken claims Joseph Smith was a prophet, but that who visited him were the same, the same Zechariah Sitchin Anunnaki type characters. Now, I'm throwing that out there because if we didn't kill our prophets, we could just read it out of the book. Okay, but I'm going to speculate because this is what would have been revealed. This is what Enoch revealed and got his book kicked out of the canonized version of the Bible. Enoch talked about where the veil came from. Women in the Middle East started wearing the veil to hide their faces at the weddings because the fallen angels were looking for wives.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That veil they wear to this day, we all think it's just a tradition that came from nowhere. It came 10,000 years ago from the book of Enoch. Mount Hermon, 33-degree latitude. Fallen angels, Genesis 6, slept with the daughters of men, begat giants. So
I had a girlfriend of mine just recently send me that book, Genesis 6 Conspiracy, I believe it's called. I just barely received it yesterday and dug into it last night. And it covered that very thing within the first couple of pages. So I'm going to recommend everybody read that because you're going to go back to the origin of where a lot of these religious beliefs and ideologies come from and where these prophets get their revelations from.
Yeah, and the word prophet comes from the word poet.
Yes, yes.
I mean, we've been conditioned to believe that to be a prophet, you have to have a special certificate from some university and a bunch of people that signed a paper. There are prophets all over this world that don't get the credit because you have the Masonic orders there to silence them.
Right.
To finish up Dallin Oaks. Dallin Oaks, then University of Chicago, okay, that really even changed some of the things that, or at least suppressed some of the things that James Henry Breasted talked about of his revelations. He and James Henry Breasted invented the term Fertile Crescent, the cradle of civilization. It was James Henry Breasted that Lord Carnarvon called when they discovered King Tut's tomb. Who is this? Get James Henry Breasted on the line, who was vacationing on a houseboat on the Nile. He came over, he says, that's King Tut. So James Henry Breasted was then given what's called the Oriental Institute on the grounds of University of Chicago. That's where they keep the lid on all the secrets of what James Henry Breasted discovered. So the Masons, the Rockefellers, the universities, the academians, the heroin launderers, David M. Kennedys, the Dallin Oakses, who are professors teaching the Rockefeller philosophies. Competition is a sin, right? Dallin Oaks recruits Mormons for the University of Chicago. You can look him up on a website today. If you're a Mormon and you want a law degree and you're going to come to University of Chicago, we take care of you. They stole me blind. Dallin Oaks and Dallin Oaks' son-in-law and his grandson stole me blind, as they have a website offering a red carpet to an attorney who wants to be part of the New World Order Rockefeller system.
They use that phrasing? The New World
Which one?
Order? New World
No, of course not. Of course not. They don't.
I'm
they're not going to.
literal, so that's why I'm asking.
Well, that is what they are. They are the top dog on the at the top of the apex of the pyramid.
Right.
So Dallin Oaks then is a professor of law at University of Chicago. This Rockefeller philosophy university, who's got David M. Kennedy, who introduced heroin with the Vatican Bank. David M. Kennedy's partners were the Archbishop of Chicago, Paul Marcinkus. His other partners were Michele Sindona, who was the owner of Watergate Plaza. Okay, Dallin Oaks then becomes state's attorney for the Daily Machine, Chicago, Cook County state's attorney. Well, from my experience as a journalist, it's the prosecutors that protect the cocaine trafficking. Name me one prosecutor that's ever been busted of cocaine trafficking. They are the gatekeepers. In every area in the country where there is a banker, a CIA group, and cocaine or heroin to launder, the gatekeeper is the prosecutor.
I never thought of that, but you have to be right. I mean, they're the ones who decide who's going to get prosecuted and who's not.
The same person that suppresses the pedophilia, because pedophiles are always drug dealers. They're always involved in pedophilia and drug dealing, because the pedophilia keeps the secret blackmail of your drug dealing and vice versa. Mm-hmm. So Dallin Oaks, state's attorney, the gatekeeper who could have busted David M. Kennedy, who's laundering for the Vatican Bank and the CIA. Now, the Vatican Bank and the Mormon Mafia, the money that they're laundering for the CIA of the cocaine and the heroin is going to pay for what's called Operation Gladio. Operation Gladio is what they use NATO to perform left-wing terrorists during the 60s and 70s. The Christian Democrats, for instance, in Italy, were always blamed for the left-wing bombings in Italy. It was all paid for by Operation Gladio, run out of NATO. David M. Kennedy had diplomatic immunity from NATO, which means he was never going to be challenged on what he was doing illegally. So you got David M. Kennedy, Mormon Mafia, Dallin H. Oaks, Cook County State's Attorney, never going to be prosecuted. If he finds out that David M. Kennedy, he could even take it to his boss at the Cook County State's Attorney. Nothing's going to happen. David M. Kennedy has diplomatic immunity from NATO. So then in 1971, Dallin Oaks becomes, let me add one more. Oh, okay, 1971, Dallin Oaks becomes president of BYU, just like his grandpa. I mean, you know, there's how many millions of people in the church? We couldn't find anybody smarter than Franklin Dennison's own grandson. It doesn't make any sense. It's nepotism. You know, only that core group of generational people that have a stake, that have secret stock in Union Pacific Railroad, okay? A quid pro quo that goes back to Brigham Young for those that keep the secrets. Yes. You don't do it for free. So Dallin Oaks then 1971 becomes president of BYU, just like his grandpa. It's well documented. BYU recruited more CIA and FBI agents than any other college in the country. I've known about 6 FBI guys here in Rockford. I know one CIA agent from Rockford who was bodyguard to William Casey. William Casey died the day before he was supposed to testify in the Iran-Contra hearings. William Casey was an alleged top pedophile, where you send out those good Mormon CIA agents to find you a boy to rape. Now, you may have to go to your own church, but nobody will ever find out. We'll blame it on some black person over on the west side or whatever. We have the prosecutor. He can blame anybody he wants.
Right.
So you got Dallin Oaks, 1971 to 1980, president of BYU. During that time, Watergate is being orchestrated against Richard Nixon. There's going to be a coup d'etat against Richard Nixon to take him out because he created DEA and he's challenging the CIA's control of the heroin and cocaine. George Herbert Walker Bush is going to take out Nixon. He's going to do it through a Watergate break-in.
And Hillary Clinton worked in the building, correct? She worked for the Watergate.
She worked for the Watergate Committee.
Okay.
From Chicago, Hugh Radomski, also from Chicago, son of a DuPage County judge. Bob Woodward, total CIA, absolutely CIA. All the stuff that he fed on the Watergate stuff's all a bunch of BS. It's all to take out Nixon. Who was Nixon's Treasury Secretary? David M. Kennedy.
Okay.
David M. Kennedy is Richard Nixon's Treasury Secretary. Where does the Watergate break-in take place? The break-in takes place at Watergate. David M. Kennedy's partner with the Vatican Bank and the heroin cocaine money laundering is Michele Sindona. Partner of Franklin National Bank in New York, a heroin money launderer, and two of the partners that brought BCCI to America, which was busted in Iran-Contra. Bank of Credit and Commerce International, big CIA international banking money launderer, arms, drugs, pedophilia. One of the top agents of BCCI, one of their banking customers, clients, allegedly was Adnan Khashoggi, the richest man in the world, photographed with Dallin Oaks. Adnan Khashoggi was the top arms dealer in the world, Saudi Arabian, 1985. Adnan Khashoggi's nephew was Dodi Fayed.
I saw that in the paperwork.
You see how close-knit these people are. Diana taken out because she's a good guy.
Yeah.
She's one of the good guys. She's exposing them. She gets taken out. So Dallin Oaks is all photographed with Adnan Khashoggi, the top Saudi Arabian drug dealer and alleged drug dealer and arms dealer for sure, richest man in the world, So Dallin Oaks then in 1980 allegedly is asked to leave BYU because he has a conflict with Apostle Ezra Taft Benson. This is something I just learned in the last couple of days. Dallin Oaks, who tells everybody in the church, do not criticize your leaders, even if it's true, as president of BYU is criticizing Apostle Ezra Taft Benson because he's claiming Ezra Taft Benson is too ultra-conservative, right-wing, crazy person because Ezra Taft Benson is revealing the satanic secret conspiracies run by CIA George Herbert Walker Bush agent Dallin Oaks. So Ezra Taft Benson was criticized, and apparently it was a pretty big deal because Oaks left BYU at that point. Ezra Taft Benson won a small battle. But even Ezra Taft Benson at one point, when somebody asked him, working in Washington all those years, weren't you very afraid? This was from Ogden Kraut. Weren't you afraid of all the evil people in Washington? They were overlooking the church office building. Ezra Taft Benson pointed over the office building and said, I'm more afraid of the people in that building than I was in Washington.
And that speaks volumes right there. I wish we had another hour or so to continue on because you are a wealth of information. Would you be willing to meet with me again later on down the road?
Absolutely.
Okay, awesome. I've been dying to
tell people this. I actually own a newspaper.
Uh-huh.
The publisher died a year ago. The local Mormon mafia and the city boys are keeping me from taking possession of it. So I did find an honest attorney now, and you're going to see some interesting things going on here. So I'd love to talk.
Excellent. Well, I thank you so much. I know that you have struggled and sacrificed and researched, and all in the name of truth over the last 40 years that you've been suffering under their rulership, shall we say, and their fraudulent activities. But I want to thank you for having the courage to come out and talk with us and share this information. That's the only way things are going to change, is if people like you call them on the carpet and shine the light of truth on them. So I do want to thank you for that. Any last remarks?
Yes, thank you, because you're the first one to know, have the knowledge of having the experience of what you had, to have people like Christy Allen on, which was one of the best interviews that anybody will ever see on this subject of how these kids are tortured. We cannot let this go on any further. We are creating a world of sociopaths, and we are told by the scriptures to stop it. And if we don't, it's going to fall upon our condemnation. So
absolutely. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that. And I appreciate you viewers. If you would like to make a comment, please do that. I'm going to ask, as always, that you be polite and you provide resources and facts, and then we can open up the dialogue. Like and subscribe and stay tuned. I will have Mr. Jon Bystrom back on for a part 2 later on down the road. You can reach me at galacticstoryteller@gmail.com, and my website is .com. You guys have a great day, and we will see you in the next video.
thank you.